Oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're like, well, I'm at this corporate gig, I'm making six figures, life is good, I got the house and the car and da da da. But this entrepreneur game is one, you have to sacrifice all of that if you want to do it the right way. Like, you can't come out of that, make a bunch of money, and and live the best life that you want to live. So I would say, like, you have to do it, and you have to understand you are going to sacrifice. But I can tell you, if you ask my wife, if you ask my friends, like, where we're at today versus where we made all the sacrifice, it was all worth it.
So we see like these wins that people like you just raised $18 million. People like Dave Savant and Sanj over at Squire just raised a bunch of money. And there's so many more people who have raised money, both institutionally and even like with crowdfunding. And I wonder, like, what if you could give me like your 2-minute, 3-minute state of Black companies being funded? What would you say it looks like at present day?
I think at present day, what we see is what Solange and I'm doing at Squire, right? We see Upsie, we see what Steven and those guys are doing over at a kid's company about, like, we see those moments, but remember, those moments are like, they're in TechCrunch, they're in Black Enterprise, they're in all of these other things. And I still hear so many stories every day of founders with great ideas, great businesses who are not getting funded at the rate of our counterparts are getting funded. So ideas on a napkin, or I haven't quite hit traction yet. And we know that our counterparts, like, they get the opportunity to figure out traction and figure out go to market. Oftentimes we don't get a chance to figure that stuff out. And so I don't think we're any better off than we were 2 years ago. There's more news around us because of what happened with George Floyd and what happened with Dante Wright. So it is pretty cool to announce a Black person's raise or a Black person's show or a Black person X right now, because you're gonna get clicks.
Yeah, and when I read your, and it's been well documented that you came through Techstars program when you had this idea for this warranty business, and I wonder, did you go for capital first or did you go for customers first? And if you went for customers first, how did you get that traction when, if you're selling warranties, that means you got to have the money to be able to put it out if I break my device?
Yeah, I got lucky in the early days. I had some former angel investors who put a little bit of money in and some time and some, built out our first kind of MVP. And so out of the gate, I had, while we were going after customers, we had a little bit of money in the bank of folks that could help us. But when we got into Techstars really turned me on to, like, what venture was and what it is and what it can be. Because before Techstars, I didn't know how to raise. I hadn't raised one venture dollar. I didn't understand how you played the venture game. I didn't understand how you pitch. I just know I had a bunch of gumption to try to do this, but I didn't know the game. It was in Techstars where they're like, hey, okay, you have all this pizzazz and this charisma. Now let us teach you how to actually play the game the way it's supposed to be played so you can actually get money in the bank. So I would say we probably went for customers first, and then learn how to raise money later.
So let's talk about that Techstars program, because Clarence Bethea today, let's say you are reviewing that Clarence's application to Techstars. Because you successfully got into the program, if you're reviewing your application as the reviewer, what is it in history's Clarence application that says, this guy's got something, then let's let him in? Because there's thousands of people who apply to these accelerators and boot camps, and you got in. So if you were reviewing your application from that day, what was it that said, yeah, he's somebody we want?
I don't believe it had us getting in. Didn't have anything to do with our application. I think us getting in had everything to do with how bold I was walking into the program. Some of it was fake boldness because internally I really didn't feel like I deserved to be, and you're asking me to go back to a time before I know what I know now. But going into the program, we had people from Silicon Valley, we had people from New York. I was really, really intimidated. My wife would tell you, I was scared because I was, wow, there's a woman from Silicon Valley who was at HP for all these years and like had this network and was great. And I think I just had to be bold, and you know my story is well documented. Like I'm just a street kid, man. I come from the hood. I grew up, doing all the wrong things that you possibly can do. So in times of being nervous and in times of like not knowing what to do, kind of the only thing that you can turn to is your confidence and being bold. And I would say that is what I was just bold enough to think, yeah, I can come in, I can do this, and it's worked out so far for us.
So let's dig into your history a little bit, because I wonder what was that moment where you realized what Silicon Valley was and what venture capital was to be nervous walking into those rooms. Like you said yourself, you were a street kid. So many of us come from these backgrounds, and too many in our neighborhoods still don't know what Silicon Valley is. What was your introduction to that world beyond, wanting to build something, which we'll talk about? What was your introduction to that specific world that says, this is a little bit intimidating because could be my future. I'm walking into a room that people who, in many ways, not all of the ways, but in many ways, hold the keys.
Right. My first foray with Silicon Valley was actually in Silicon Valley. I was in a program called Village Capital. They run a great program where they give the top two companies 100 grand at the end of the program. And the final piece of the program was in Silicon Valley. And it was at this big law firm. And then you move to this, like where all the Silicon Valley like investors meet up deal. And I remember we had like 80 Silicon Valley investors there. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn. They didn't give a damn about me. Like it was clear that I was a nobody, that I meant nothing to them. I was just a black guy in the room. Yeah. And I remember being like, wow, like nobody even though I felt like I was like, I won the competition. So even though I felt like, man, like I know what I'm doing. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm figuring it out. And, I'm charismatic. I'm all these things that they say you want to be. And it was clear, that was 2016. It was like, nah, we don't believe. And I actually had an investor tell me, he said to me, Clarence, I've never seen a black founder go to exit or IPO at like a billion plus exit. So I just have a hard time believing that a black founder can build a big company. So I'm just not interested. Wow. And it was sobering.
So one can take that many ways. You being the guy who you grew up being, when you have somebody put that kind of, stamp on you saying, I've never seen nobody like you do this, like, what did your spirit say, like, in that moment? Like, I'm going to be that guy?
Can we curse on this show?
Do what you need to do.
Look, I'm a big chip on the shoulder type of guy. And so when people were telling me, especially earlier on in the journey, that I would never do this, I would never do that, like, you don't have the background, you don't have the pedigree. That's a word I kept hearing. You don't have the pedigree. You didn't go to Harvard. You didn't drop out of Stanford. You don't have the network. Man, I tend to say, fuck you. Like in my mind, right?
Yeah,
in my mind, I'm like, all right, okay, I'm gonna show you. And I think I'm actually getting out of that phase now of this journey because everybody seems to believe that we can do what we can do now. But early on in the journey, I would use that as motivation to just be like, all right, well, if you don't believe me, let me show you.
What do you think happens in the tech space for Black entrepreneurs? Do you think not enough of us have that? Or do you think so many of us have that maybe they're not getting recognized? Like, how come not enough of us, as to your earlier point, and it's very well known, not enough of us are raising capital like at the levels that you have and that others that we've mentioned? Do not enough of us have that, or are there other issues that keep us from getting to the place to where we're even having the conversation at that level with an investor?
Yeah, so I see it both ways, to be honest with you. And then this is always tough for me to talk about. There's one side of it from a founder, you're a founder, right? Like we're founders where we're like we all think that we deserve money. And that's cool. And like, yes, we should be more bold and whatever. But on the other side of me, which is I'm a scout at True Ventures out of San Francisco. They're one of the top seed stage firms. I also get a lot of inbound from Black founders. And what I see a lot of times is we're not ready for prime time. And not only are we not ready for prime time, because we've had to fight and claw and scratch and like have that kind of screw you mentality, we're also don't have our ears open to hear like what we need to hear to get to the next level. And I give you a quick example. I was talking to a founder, I don't know, a few months ago, and we were going back and forth over Zoom, and I was like, hey, like, and I'm not the one to give advice, but I do give you like, here's what worked for Clarence. Here's what I did to have success. And feel free to follow it or not, but there's just fundamental things you can't do in a pitch. You can't do in a pitch deck. There's just certain stuff, like me and you could probably sit and have an hour phone call. Like, right?
It's a fact.
And I was going back and forth with the founder, and I said, hey, I really think, you should try doing this. Like you don't talk about traction. I think I was talking about traction. You don't talk about traction anywhere. And he was like, well, I'm kind of pre-revenue. I said, great, but you still have some traction points. Like how fast are you building your product, or how many people on your wait list do you have? Like all of that is considered traction in this game, because dudes are raising millions of dollars off of ideas on a napkin. So you show some traction, you can get it. And the dude literally looked at me and he was like, F you, you just don't want to see me win. You want to be the only one in the room, blah, 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 blah. And I remember thinking like, man, like if you had just listened, I wasn't here to like hurt you. I was here to give you everything that somebody gave to me at one point. And so I think while yes, there's a funding problem, there's also that attitude of, and I had it at the beginning. I had to I got checked on it. And somebody sat me down and said, hey man, you're not going to be your best self unless you learn to listen.
Wow.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? It's like, everybody's not out here to hurt you. Some people are out here to help you, and you have to decipher between the two. So I think that we have to, because we've been in the fight and the struggle for so long, we have to understand that there are people out here to help. And sometimes you got to learn to just listen and then walk away gracefully and decipher and take what you need out of it.
So how do you decipher through that? How do you know who's really trying to give you some game and the ones that are, just saying whatever they got to say because they don't believe?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody to me deserves to be listened to. How I take it is up to me. So if you're giving me advice, and I may say, Will, like, man, like, thanks for the advice, man. I appreciate it. And I'm so humbled that you would even take your time out to give it to me. Then it's my job to walk away and start to look at what you're saying and say, okay, you know what? It's kind of full of it at this point. But this little 10% that he gave me is going to help my business go to the next level. Oftentimes we walk away and we say, if we don't agree with one thing that you say, we stop agreeing with everything that you say. And I just don't believe that that's true. There's nuggets in all of this advice that you should get. And it takes a humble spirit to figure out that 10% that you should be taking.
I wonder, you're making me think about when you said the investor said, I've never seen anybody, exit at $1 billion IPO who looked like you. And you talked about that happened after winning a competition. And I wonder how much stock we should be putting into competitions then, because, there's a lot of diversity theater out here. And $25,000 checks can mean nothing to a lot of these companies. And it could be, hey, we had a Black company win our competition, they got this $25,000 check. And so apparently to that investor, you winning a competition was not enough to say this guy Clarence is on to something. How should we be looking at competitions with a critical mind, but also one, hey, I'll take the 25K, but how should we also be looking at them critically and strategically as proof points that we're on to something?
Right. Right. Great question. Competitions are great from the standpoint of you get up in front of most time a live crowd in practice and be able to have the ability to understand what it's like to change an emotion in the room, because great founders can change emotion in a room. Great founders can make you like hear a business and you say, oh, that's stupid, and then get in front of it, you get up in front of the stage and the whole emotion in the room changes. So I think they're good for that practice. But like you said, we can't put too much stock in it because oftentimes these competitions are theater. I need a black person, or I need a couple of black people to do it. Like literally, I've been reached out to where people say, "Hey, we want you to be in our $25,000 pitch competition," and I send them the link to an article. Like, hey man, like you didn't even do no homework. All you saw was that I was black.
Yeah.
You know, there's somebody more deserving for this at this stage. And so I think there's a lot of diversity theater that plays into this. So I think we have to look at it for what it is. It is an opportunity to pitch. And whenever you have the opportunity to pitch, you should take it. Win, lose, or draw to get better. Because in order, like I keep telling people, in order to raise the money that we raised today, you know how many bad pitches I've had? I've had hundreds of bad pitches in order to get to a pitch where it made sense. So I would say do it, but understand what you're doing.
We talked a little bit about your introduction, finding out that Silicon Valley even existed, right? And there's so many in our communities, the communities that we come from, that that still struggle with, you know, some of the issues that you said you did as you were growing up. And what do you find as a success if we're trying to sell them on, hey, there's this other world out here, other world of building really big companies? What do you find as a successful narrative or a successful story that would get their attention to see that there's a viable path in this world that they may not have considered for themselves?
Right. I speak at jails and prisons, especially before COVID. I do that a lot. And I say the same thing to them. I am no smarter, no more savvy, no more, like, my business acumen is not any better than any of theirs. It's all about taking the time and just doing it. Like a lot of times it's just about jumping into the game and being a voracious learner. I don't believe, like, I think oftentimes we make founders, we make them feel like they're special. Like we have the special innate, because we feed off the Elon Musk and the Steve Jobs kind of aura. Yeah. And the truth is, I don't look at anything that we've done at Upsie as special or unique or anything like that. I look at the work that our team do on behalf of our customers as special and unique. But as a founder, I'm like, man, like there's nothing special about Clarence. And so that is my message to anybody. Every time I go speak, I say, there's nothing special about me. All of you are smarter than I am. All of you are more savvy than I am. The one thing that I don't know that you all are more than me is I'm gonna outwork you at every turn. And if you can outwork people, because look, I got a lot of white buddies who are founders. Man, they are some of the laziest SOBs I've ever been around in my life.
Yeah.
But they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. We can't be that. I can't be that. I got to outwork you in order to get in the room. So my message is always the same. You want to get in the room, you want to have a chance, outwork everybody.
So let's go a step further on there, because let's say you sold, okay, yeah, I know business is, you know, an opportunity out there for somebody, but I don't really have any like brilliant ideas. Like there's nothing special about warranties, you know, it's a warranty, right? And so let's go a step further and say, okay, now you've sold me that business. There's this viable path, some way that I can find a different life for myself, but I don't know like what to do. I've in effect devalued my own idea. So what would you say to that?
To that person just trying to figure out like, what do I do next?
Exactly. They don't feel like they have an idea worthy of millions of dollars or market attention or et cetera.
Man, Google is a powerful tool. You literally can start your business by Googling how to start a business. You know, there's tools like Shopify. There's so many, you know, BigCommerce. There's so many tools where you can just say, you know what? I want to start this thing. I'm just going to set up a Shopify store and figure it out. And a lot of times, again, it goes back to my first comment. Sometimes you just got to go and do it. Like it's going to be all screwed up. It ain't going to make sense. I got many buddies who wants to start businesses. They're just like, well, but what do I do next? I'm like, just go do it. And guess what? When you mess up, you'll figure out the right thing to do. Like a lot of this game is not in books and all these other places that people want you to find it. Sometimes you just gotta go do the work, mess up, and figure it out.
I want to talk about the milestones to actually raising as much money as you did. I asked you this question from the perspective of like how, like if you were reading the Clarence's application to get into Techstars, what if I'm the VC and I'm reading your inbound to raise this $18 million that you 18 plus million that you raised? What if you're the VC, talk to me about those indicators that you presented. And what is the VC reading that says, yeah, I want in on Clarence's deal?
Yeah, I believe that there's a couple of triggers that get VCs interested in your business. One, I think traction. Like if you can show that you're growing the business in a steady way, in a sustainable way, that was one thing that we showed. So if I'm a VC on the outside, I'm like, oh, they've grown the business dramatically. That's great. Two, I'm a big bet on team, and our team is the smartest, brightest, hardest working folks I've ever been around. And so I'm looking at our team, and I'm looking at what they've done in the past and what they're doing now, and I'm betting on that team because they're that good. And then three, I would say that the space, the industry is $48 billion now. It's supposed to grow to be 67 billion by 2027 in the United States alone, $160 billion globally. I'm looking at that space and say, okay, they don't have to get everything right to win. Because I think those are hard spaces to go in. When you got to be right 100% of the time, we can be right a quarter percent of the time and still build a multi-billion-dollar business. So
go in there, because I don't hear a lot of people talk about that. So give some education to that point there, please.
On
you don't have to be right all the time to find success.
Yeah. So I think when I look at some people's businesses, they're like, well, if I'm right, this is what happens, right? And I actually don't believe that those are the best business. Now, we've seen those businesses work out and they, multi-billion-dollar businesses, but I didn't want to be in a business where I had to be 100% right in order for this thing to be a rocket ship. And what I mean by that is other players like Best Buy can continue to do what they do. Target can continue to do what they do. Some of our startup competitors that are on the B2B side can continue to do what they do. And Upsie still can be a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't believe that this is a winners take all deal. And it's showing itself up because, those companies are thriving, we are thriving, and we're all kind of doing what we do right now in the market.
More often than not, I personally, even, and I'm sure this is a sentiment, that's mainstream. I see warranties as like an unwanted, like upsell, like, hey, you bought some Q-tips, you want the warranty? Like, right. So like, how do you get over this consumer sense about warranties?
Yeah. I mean, so first I would say that's what's so exciting about our space, right? It's a space of where like you hate warranties or you don't want to hear about warranties. And we're trying to put this fresh new look that warranties are valuable to you. I always go back to the stats about where we're at in this country. Over 40% of consumers don't have $400 in their bank account if something breaks or need to be replaced. And almost 70% of consumers don't have $1,000 in their savings account. So when you look at where this country is as a whole, the next iPhone that comes out is going to cost $1,500. We no longer can say that the iPhone is a luxury. It was a luxury in 2008 when it launched. It is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. If you look around yourself right now, you have 4 or 5 devices around you that keep you connected to your world, whether it's your laptop, your tablet, your phone, whatever that may be. And so when we're looking at Upsie, we're saying, well, we want to make it more affordable. We want to make it more transparent. And we want to make sure that we are servicing the hell out of our customers. And if we can do those 3 things and stay true to who we are, then we can carve out our own little niche in this space, which will end up being a big thing for consumers. So yes, warranties are not sexy. We say that all the time, but it is valuable for most of Americans.
But sometimes it's not even about the value. It's about the experience of dealing with customer service. So I may be sold on, hey, you got this $1,500 iPhone, but I know if I call, they're gonna be running me through 8 different prompts on the phone. Then they're gonna send me to Russia somewhere that I have to figure out how to explain to them that something's wrong with my phone. So we don't really have good relationships with warranty providers, right? And so it's like they're always trying to figure out how to not pay to help me, get my stuff renewed. How do you manage the customer service side of this experience without exposing yourself to people who just want to take advantage of the system?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are always going to be people who want to take advantage, right? That's no matter what business you're in. But we have a very, very clear rule inside of Upsie. That is take care of the customer first, no matter what. We actually have a budget inside of Upsie that is to take care of customer budget. My head of customer service. So in our business, things go wrong sometimes. That's just the nature of the business. We're dealing with insurance companies who always want to not pay claims as much as possible. And we're like the opposite. We're like, no, you're going to pay claims even if we have to pay the claim. And so we have this budget that if you start to go through that process and we see you going through that process, literally you'll get a phone call from us say, hey, Will, look, we see you having a tough time. We just want to get you taken care of. I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars from per customer that have made us simply because they're like, well, they actually care. Well, when you take out a warranty at Best Buy, they're not going to call you and say, hey, man, we see you having a tough time. Let us take care of you. So what we've done, we created this like loyalty with our customers that they say, look, even if I'm in the right, Upsie is always going to take care of me. Even when you're wrong, like I got a buddy, we just sent them a brand new washing machine. We just didn't talk to them, didn't ask for permission, didn't do anything. It just shows up at their house one day. And they're like, holy moly, what's going on? Because this is what we believe in. You're going to be taken care of.
I dig it. You mentioned like the Best Buys and the Targets. And you also mentioned there's some other, sharks in the water. I want you to level set like what the landscape looks like for the warranty market. And like, is this a game where it's like a David and Goliath and you're like trying to figure out how to topple the big dragons, or do you have to outrun your counterparts who are, in the early stages to your earlier point? You don't have to be 100% right. You got to be 25% right or 30% right. What has to happen to where you're 50% right? Is it toppling the Best Buy, the Target, or is it making sure that, Flupsy, Bupsy is not, taking the market share?
Right. So there's two sides of our market. There is the B2B side. So that is the side when you go to the website, like you go to buy an e-commerce skateboard or something, and there's a little box there that says, Will, would you like to add a warranty to your checkout? There's that side of the market. Then there's Upsie. That's on the totally different side of the market, which is B2C. Like we won't ever be at your checkout, but we will always be here. So when you leave checkout, you can come to Upsie, find your thing, protect it, and move on. So when you look at the landscape, there's like the Best Buys of the world, there's Square Trades of the world, there is like the Shurians of the world. They all are sitting on that like B2B side where they want to be at checkout, they want to work with the retailers and get that easy distribution. What we're saying is that we believe that the most important person in this equation is actually not the retailer, it's the customer. So we want to sit on their side. So which means you got to give great pricing, you got to make sure you're transparent, and you got to make sure you service the hell out of your customers, because if you don't, they're just going to go back to the way it used to be done. And so for us, when we look at the landscape, we're always in a David Goliath type story, because everybody only knows like the big box retailers doing it the way they do. And I actually enjoy that, because the way I'm built, I want it to be David and Goliath, and I want to be the one throwing the rock. But then we have the other side where startups are coming out and doing the B2B thing, and we're like, cool, like, great. They're going directly after the Best Buys too. I think more people in the game helps us topple the big players. So I'm appreciative of kind of the players that are doing it differently, but from a startup standpoint.
I would imagine, and I could be wrong because I don't know your whole business, but I would imagine the warranties are like the face value opportunities, and that there's some rabbit hole to where you can build a stronger lifetime value of this relationship. How do you get deeper relationships with your customers beyond just, insuring their iPhone?
So you would be amazed that the average household buys 7 new devices a year and has over 50 connected devices in their home. So when you look at how do we build a relationship, it is not just protecting your iPhone. It's about how do we protect your TVs and how do we protect your laptop? And then how do we continue to get deeper and deeper in your life? So what happens, we got customers where they got 50 devices protected under us. Everything in their house is protected with Upsie. And then where we see ourselves going is going vertical, right? So auto warranties is another place where there's a big opportunity, $20 billion industry in the United States, where we think that eventually we're going to end up playing that game too. And then it's about latching on, hey, you bought this iPhone, you can also get this specific case for your phone because we know everything about your device. So we see all these different verticals going into products where we play, but taking a step back, I tell investors all the time, we are extremely focused on being the best warranty selling company in the United States. And then we'll let this other stuff come, kind of as the customer kind of pulls it out of us.
In your story, I was reading that you used to work for a trucking company, and there's a time where you said you negotiated new contracts and increased revenue by 200% while managing 10 people. So you had chops, right? And so this is before you started Upsie, obviously. And there are many people who are great at their jobs. They work for, a big corporation, or they're on an upward trajectory in their career. They're not yet founders of their businesses, but they want to start businesses. But they're finding success. Those success indicators are apparent at what they do. But they're afraid to take that entrepreneurial leap. You weren't afraid, apparently. What do you say to those folks who are sitting on ideas? They're so good at delivering for their employer, but they don't know how to step out in being the employer.
Yeah. My advice go back to what I said earlier. You got to get out and just do it. It is scary. It sucks. It's, you got to trim your life back to a place of where you're at bare minimums. You hear the stories about the ramen noodle diet among entrepreneurs and like no cars. Like literally, my wife and I had a 96 Sebring. The air conditioning and the heat didn't work. So in the wintertime in Minnesota, I would literally have blankets in the car, be driving with blankets over me. And in the summer, I would be stripped down to my undershirt and my underwear in the car until I got to my destination, and then put my suit on when I got there. We were down to bare minimum, no going out to eat, no vacations, no nothing, because we knew we want to sacrifice now. And I got this saying, either you're going to sacrifice now or you're going to sacrifice later.
Yeah, my dad did that to me. You're going to do it. You're going to sacrifice.
You're going to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're like, well, I'm at this corporate gig, I'm making 6 figures, life is good, I got the house and the car and da. But this entrepreneur game is one, you have to sacrifice all of that if you want to do it the right way. You can't come out of that, make a bunch of money and live the best life that you want to live. So I would say you have to do it, and you have to understand you are going to sacrifice. But I can tell you, if you ask my wife, if you ask my friends, where we're at today versus where we made all the sacrifice, it was all worth it.